And show support. If I don't recognize you, then chances are you either worked with my dad or just smelled the food from outside. I'd like to recognize the honorary pallbearers for the evening. We have Carlos Berrios, a longtime family friend, whom my dad considered an older brother here in the States. Next, we have Louis Vargas, my dad's brother-in-law, whom my dad is godfather to his daughter Anna. The next four gentlemen are the younger people of my generation who made an impact on my dad. We got Ovidio Toledo, representing the Toledo family, who we've been very close to for nearly 2 decades. We also have Kevin Young, or as my dad would call him, Piña, a longtime family friend who my dad had a comedic relationship with. Coming shortly is Justin Early, representing the Earlys whom my family entrusted since my upbringing. Along with Ovi and Piña, Justin was considered a son by my dad. Last but not least is Mike Estrella, who along with his father Miguel Sr. have been great resources of support since my dad became ill. Immediately after my dad's passing, Mike reached out in a way that only a select few could. He showed the sort of great heart he has by helping me carry the pain I felt as I described the manner in which my dad exited. So thank you to the six, as well as all of you who have contributed to making his passing a bit more bearable. Before I begin the eulogy, I want to give my apologies because I'll be speaking mostly in English. Feel free to translate amongst yourselves or search for the subtitles button as my dad would. I also want to acknowledge my relatives residing throughout Latin America who will be watching this in a few days. Regardless where you reside on the globe, you are all part of this tribute. Todo tranquilo, so we begin. Thanks, Grandma. Never did we imagine that the man lying before our eyes would pass away so early. Everyone who at one point knew my dad took note of how strong he was. He was the real-life Pepe el Toro, a physically fit individual who was incapable of illness or even fatigue. Roberto Margol González Martinez was born in 1959 in Nicaragua to Federico González and Paula Martinez. He was the second child between the two, but first male. He was raised in a time of extreme hardship, as his country was in the midst of civil war. The family was extremely poor, sometimes going days without food, or sharing a single egg between a large family. Roberto was only able to reach the 3rd grade. With the little free time he had, he grew a passion for baseball and boxing. However, no joy could last long enough, as family members suspected of rebel sympathy were taken from their homes and murdered by the National Guard. After a domestic dispute with his father at 13 years of age, Roberto ran away from home. He found work with a gentleman repairing car radios. Not having a place to stay after a long day of work, he would sleep in the back seat of whichever car was staying in the night. As the civil war between the Sandinista rebels and the Somoza dictatorship heightened, and more of his friends and family were murdered, Roberto decided to join the revolutionary cause. He served until the revolution's triumph and became a police officer. In the early 1980s, he left the Sandinistas to move to the United States. Before arriving here, he traveled through the countries residing between the U.S. and Nicaragua, at one point making Mexico his home. He crossed the American border illegally. As told by him, he was packed into the bottom of a truck as sardines in a can. Once he made it to California, with fake papers, he was able to work various jobs. Of course, being undocumented, these jobs were low paying. He worked 2 jobs to support himself here. The 2 were coming from dysfunctional relationships. They both became the shoulders to lean on as they exchanged stories. My mother grew sick of American men, specifically the selfish and egotistical attitudes embedded in them. So she decided to give this skinny little illegal immigrant a chance, and the 2 married in 1987. And in 1989, they gave birth to a legend. Once my father was able to stabilize our family, he started to increase the amount of help for his family back home. Nicaragua has always been a very poor 3rd world country. He felt obligated to help, especially once his father died around the time my parents wed. He became the new leader of a large family of 9 siblings, including himself. He wouldn't go a month without sending some form of assistance, whether it be money through Western Union or boxes of goods. He purchased various lands through the years and helped construct his mother a new home. He would soon travel on a yearly basis, delivering at least 4 large travel bags of 70 pounds each, filled with clothes, tools, and toys. Once there in his hometown of Masaya, he would distribute all the items he accumulated. If he felt that someone was left out, he would begin to hand out his own personal belongings and money to make sure everyone was happy. In Masaya, he made it a tradition of purchasing a few piñatas and hosting parties for the children. It didn't matter if you knew the children or families. Everyone was welcome to have some food in his jacket at some point during the trip back home. My father never made it big here in America, as some back home imagined he did. Being that he came to America in his mid-20s, he had a very difficult time trying to learn the English language. Hence, his natural ability at repairing cars and electronics would not become appreciated without formal education, let alone a decent grasp of English. However, he was satisfied with a job that gave enough to provide for my family and follow up projects back home. Some may wonder, how come a guy like my dad, who had served in the military and endured a lot of hardship, not made it big as a military officer or possibly a politician back home? There's no doubt he had the leadership quality and strong morals to do so, but the answer is pretty simple. My dad was selfless. He didn't have an ego. He didn't search for recognition for the good deeds he had done. The man would give and wouldn't expect anything in return. He would let loans slip by. Never did he say, "I'm doing this so people could like me," or "I'm doing this so I can make my way into heaven." My dad transcended both religion and politics. If my dad couldn't give you money, then he would give you an item. If he couldn't give you an item, then he would give you the opportunity to make him the butt of a joke just to see you happy. There were times when he would come back from Nicaragua and be so upset if even one person wasn't satisfied with whatever he gave them. He would obsess off of people being unsatisfied. He would take it personal and vow to make up for it as soon as possible. He was the same way here in America with his giving nature. He would give rides to whoever had asked for it right at his job. He would even cram his lunch bag with whatever food he could scrap from the refrigerator or kitchen, just in case someone looked hungry when lunchtime came about. My dad was a very social person. From what I've just said, don't get the impression he was a complete saint. The man loved beer. He loved to hang out with his buddies and throw back a few and listen to music nonstop as they ate his carne asada or paella. However, I want to tell all of you one thing. I want to eliminate a misconception some folks have held leading to his final weeks. His liver cancer was not the result of alcohol abuse. This is something over 5 doctors cleared for us while my dad was still with us. My dad's condition came as a mystery, as I will lay out in a bit. But back to what I was saying, this man loved social interactions. His heart was huge. It didn't matter what race, gender, or sexual orientation you were. As long as you acknowledged him as a human being, he will be the best friend you could ask for. My father was hospitalized in mid-November after a sudden liver attack at our home. Up to this point, he felt a bit ill, but clinics he visited told him he just had an ear infection. This he did, in fact, have. My mom rushed him to the San Mateo County Hospital. The ride wasn't easy. My mom had to pull over a couple of times because the pain was so overwhelming he couldn't breathe properly. Once at the hospital, they gave him pain medication. They advised that he stay overnight. The right lobe of his liver had a growth. The doctors performed various exams and concluded he had a bacterial infection of the liver. His entire month-long stay at San Mateo was basically the medical staff trying various antibiotics seeking to find which could lower the white blood cell count. The count would fluctuate. Some days he felt well, other times he couldn't get out of bed. It was confusing everyone. After a couple of weeks, they decided to hook up an apparatus to my dad to drain the growth. However, leading into December, his pain began to increase. The hospital then enlisted the help of Mills Peninsula Health Services in Burlingame. Throughout this time, my father was losing weight as daily exams took place. Pain. My mom rushed him to the San Mateo County Hospital. The ride wasn't easy. My mom had to pull over a couple of times because the pain was so overwhelming. In the two-month span I spent with Roberto Gonzalez, I became a man. I experienced living life as the only male of the house while he remained in the hospital. I would go to school and work with a dark cloud looming over my thoughts. Even though I was experiencing a type of depression, I always thought my dad would survive. The man worked out from when he was first hospitalized until a few days before his death. And he mumbled, "Mm-hmm," and turned his head with a smile. 10 minutes later, his breathing had ceased. I walked over with what felt like an eternity and saw him with his legs leaning towards the side of the bed. His eyes were open, facing the door.